Hello everyone, this is P and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you and another edition in our ever-going, unrated and unappreciated movie review series. And this edition we will focus on Robert De Niro's fine coming-of-age drama A Bronx Tale. Released in September the 29th, 1993, it stars Robert De Niro, Chazz Palminteri, Lillo Brancato and Taral Hicks, and of course was directed by Robert De Niro. Now the setup within the Bronx Tale is that we of course set up within the Bronx as per the title, within the 1960s, where we follow the story of young Italian American Calgero. We see him as a very youngster, very bright, very happy-go-lucky, and he's being raised by his father Lorenzo, who works as a bus driver. Now everything in life seems good, but suddenly one day when sitting outside, Calgero witnesses feared gangster Sonny killing a man in the streets over a dispute over a parking space. When the police interview Calgero and bring him out to identify the killer within a lineup, Calgero has the opportunity to identify Sonny but declines to do so. Now Sonny acknowledges what Calgero did and takes the kid under his wing, giving him a job, trying to teach him lessons of life and living on the streets. When his father Lorenzo finds out, he disapproves of this, knowing full well the kind of criminal life that Sonny leads, and he doesn't want his son to get involved in the same gangster lifestyle. Despite this, Sonny remains dazzled and enamored by Sonny's position and status within the neighborhood, and continues and connects and forge a bond of him over the next 8 years as he grows up within a teenager. Now we get a further story plot later on when Calgero, later on known as C throughout the film, meets and starts a relationship with a black girl, and the film really changes trajectory and focuses a lot more on racial hatred and antagonism between both the black and Italian communities. We get some intense and powerful scenes showing the conflict between the two demographics, and C really needs to find out and discover where his true priorities lies within his life. Now for me, A Bronx Tale is a fine film measured with some assurance and consideration by debuting director Robert De Niro. Now of course any film fan fully recognises Robert De Niro as one of the greatest actors of all time, and this is largely due to the major association that he had with one of the greatest directors of all time, Martin Scorsese. And if we go over some of his performances in some of his greatest roles, they normally involve his collaboration with Martin Scorsese. So of course when we look at the likes of Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull in 1980, for which he won his Oscar for Best Actor. Later on down the line, of course, of the iconic and seminal gangster classic Goodfellas, the equally classic and I think even superior Casino later on as well. So it would be very easy to look at Bronx Tale and make comparisons to a certain amount of Scorsese's work, whether it be Mean Streets or Goodfellas. And yes, certainly there is that same tone, the same kind of look and aesthetic when De Niro very much captures that same kind of authentic visualization of street life, whether it be in the Bronx or New York City or in certain Italian American environments, and it looks very real and genuine when we look at the film on screen. When we look at The Bronx Tale, it's very different to a lot of Scorsese films, and the fact that The Bronx Tale is not really a gangster film in any sense of the word. I'll give credit to Robert De Niro for not trying to make it a gangster film, which would have been very easy to do given his association with Martin Scorsese. This is very much more of a drama that focuses on the father-son relationship, the racial divides between certain communities, a young man who really has to face difficult decisions and choices within his life. A Bronx Tale is a very leisurely and a very understated movie, and I think De Niro does well to avoid the flashiness and sensationalism as what we would get with the likes of Goodfellas. This is far more of a grounded, much more of a touching take on this story, and yet it remains very sincere alike. So I think it's a very fine accomplishment from Robert De Niro in his debut role as director. The integral character, of course, is Calgero, or C, which I will call for the rest of this review, and it's very well played by young actor Lillo Brancato. Overall, C is a very likeable, very sweet character. He's very open to having his own mind and making his own decisions. He has a good sense of what's right and what's wrong. We see he's very much conflicted by his relationship between both his father and Sonny. He very much wants to be Sonny, and that's the real figure that he looks up to, but at the same time he remains very much loyal to his father. And another example of this is where we see Sonny and Lorenzo go into a boxing match, and they have the upper tier seats at the back, and then they see Sonny with ringside seats. Sonny offers C to go and sit with him, but he stays there and remains loyal to his father. And those are just one of the many examples where I think adds a lot of integrity and likability to C as a character. C very much remains conflicted by the philosophies of his father, who's very much about working hard and earning everything by yourself, not wasting your talent, as he remarks throughout the story. And overall, these ethics and morals sound right, but C questions whether they actually get a person anywhere. The fact that Lorenzo isn't very rich, you know, him and his family are just about getting by, and then he contrasts that with Sonny, who seems to have all the money and all the status. We see early on in the beginning of the film where they have a dice game, and Sonny's throwing around all the money, and he's putting everybody in the back room who he feels will ruin his luck as well. So he looks at Sonny as someone with far more control and establishment within his community. C also faces further conflict when he looks at his Italian American friends, and he can see that the anger and frustration that they feel where they deem that certain members of the black community are coming over and taking over their territory. And this is really where we get the shift in the film and the story, and this is where it becomes far more provocative and far more intense. But yet again, it's a very good central lead performance from Lillo Brancato. Robert De Niro himself produces a very fine performance as Lorenzo. He's highly protective of his son. He gives him further lessons, and we see that very much so at the beginning of the movie. But he's not overbearing. He generally just wants to prevent his son from going down the wrong path. And all of the scenes that we have between De Niro and his son, whether it be the younger or the older version, are very touching, they're very funny, and they carry a lot of weight. And I actually respect Robert De Niro a lot, because it would have been very easy for him to take the Sonny role. Again, that would have been far more typical, but I think overall too similar to what we saw in his role as Jimmy Conway in Goodfellas. But despite having the more limited screen time, I still think it's a very strong performance from Robert De Niro. In particular, we have that standout scene early on in the movie when he confronts Sonny for taking his son under his wing and giving him a job. We get that fiery confrontation between the two, and then we get that classic scene when he's talking to his son about the working man being the tough guy, the real man, the real tough guy, getting up day after day and working day after day. That's classic De Niro, you know, that's De Niro in his prime. I love scenes like that, and it just reminds you how great an actor he is. So a very fine performance from Robert De Niro in the role. But for me, the star turn of the movie is from Chazz Palminteri as Sonny. The movie itself was based on a play that Palminteri wrote and actually starred as a one-man play overall. When Robert De Niro went to see the play, he was so amazed by the performance and the story, that's when he bought the movie rights and agreed to have Palminteri star with him in the movie. And I think as Sonny, Palminteri is very charismatic. Despite being feared, he's far more likeable and honourable than what we would typically see from a gangster movie. And once again, this is Robert De Niro really avoiding those typical cliches that we would see from this type of movie. They really avoid not making Sonny a typical monster. The scenes between both him and C are very believable and quite moving overall, and I think that's down to Palminteri's performance. Sonny very much sees C as his son. He generally cares for him and teaches him far more lessons about the harsh realities of the street life. And I love all of these scenes. We have the very much of the classic scene when he tells him about the infamous door test. Basically, when you take a woman on a date and you put her inside the car, whether she reaches out for the other door to let you in or not, that's how you can tell whether she's worth it or not. So again, I love little scenes and the comparisons that they use throughout the movie as well. The film itself is nowhere near as violent as what Scorsese's movies have been, his most infamous ones, but there still are, as I mentioned before, very intense moments. We get one very provocative scene where we see the young Italian Americans beating up on a black teenager on his bike. We get another scene when Sonny walks into a bar and he has these group of very much biker gangs spilling alcohol all over the bar, and then he steps in and he beats them down along with his gangster friends. So yes, while De Niro also uses a lot of intense violent scenes, the climatic scene near the end as well, it's nowhere near as hyper violent as what we would see from a lot of these movies. And again, that's really De Niro's more sensitive way in terms of making this movie. Very much like Scorsese, he uses a lot of music, a lot of very much of soul and Italian jazz throughout this film as well, so that's where people may feel it's a lot more closer in spirit to the likes of Goodfellas. But once again, he doesn't use the same kind of hyperkinetic editing as Scorsese does. This is a far more measured, slightly slow burning movie overall, but I still think overall it's got its heart in the right place and it's very sincere, and I think overall it firmly conveys the message in what it's trying to say in a very watchable fashion. So if I had to give an overall score for A Bronx Tale, I would give it a 7.1 out of 10. Now when we look at the overall release of A Bronx Tale, on a budget of 10 million, it did manage to gross over 17.3 million at the box office, so it did manage to cover its cost perhaps, but it wasn't a huge big box office success. And I think primarily the reason for this, as I mentioned before, is that it's a very understated movie. There's no flash, there's no sensationalism, there's no real big scenes of massive shootouts, there's no real quotable lines that have revered themselves in culture overall. And maybe that's what Robert De Niro wanted to do. If you notice, a lot of these prolific and great actors, when they have their first directorial debuts, it tends to be much more of a small, intimate, character-driven piece overall. And this is what A Bronx Tale is. So maybe that's why it didn't have enough really to pull in mainstream audiences at the box office. And really, a lot of gangster films around this time were, whilst very well critically received, weren't really massive big blockbuster hits at the time anyway, within the early to mid 90s overall. Now maybe this film would have garnered a bit more attention if it were directed by Scorsese perhaps, but still I think Robert De Niro does more than a satisfactory job as a director, and it's a bit of a shame that A Bronx Tale doesn't get the attention it deserves, because as I mentioned before, it really is a really solid directorial debut from Robert De Niro, and I think it does overall deserves way more appreciation than what it got on its release and post its release as well. So those are my thoughts and feelings on review of The Bronx Tale. Let me know what you think in the comments below. How did you think Robert De Niro did in his first directorial debut? How do you think this movie compared to the likes of other Scorsese films overall? And tell me what you thought was best about the film. If you haven't yet to see it, I highly imagine you check it out. I think it's hovering around on Netflix at this point, so you can catch it out on there. Come back to this video review and let me know what you think in the comments below. Please also hit those like and subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality reviews like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.